welcome to today's webinar about how the housing sector could and should reach its net zero targets. Today's session, sponsored by Decarbonisation, will look at how best social landlords should go about identifying stock to retrofit and how it should fund the work. Of course, the sector knows that it has to hit net zero by 2050 at the latest. That's the UK government's target, of course. Scottish and Welsh landlords have even tougher targets ahead of them. And Insider Housing's exclusive research last year suggested the full scale of the challenge to get there for the first time. After surveying 207 landlords, social landlords from across the UK, we estimated it would cost around about 104 billion to deliver by that 2050 target. Frankly, however you crunch numbers, it's a challenge. And obviously, there are pots of funding out there, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund for one, but it's obvious that that's just a start, and we're just starting to make progress now. And we know that conversations are very much live about what stock is suitable for retrofit and what work to prioritise first. Then there are questions about what to do with stock that will be difficult or impossible to upgrade. For those homes that remain, the questions are about what work to do and when. And as a reminder, just to give a bit of context, Boris Johnson's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution has a target to install 600,000 heat pumps a year in homes and public buildings by 2028. There's a huge amount to talk about, and we'll get into more of the detail very shortly. But to guide us through the minefield, we've got a fantastic panel lined up for you today. We'll be hearing from Guy Woodruff, Policy Lead for the host of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Nick Huston, Future Energy Business Manager with Decarbonisation. Rose Bean, Interim Director for Assets and Sustainability with Abry Group. And David Lewis, Executive Director for Assets with Clwyd Allen. So, yeah, welcome all, and we'll be hearing from them very shortly. But before we do, welcome to you all at home as well, and in your offices. And we'll just kick things off just with a bit of a test for where you are in the room. So we've got a poll which is popping up now, and that is: do you intend to apply for funding to retrofit stock? So it's just a starter for 10. Give us a bit of a guide to where everybody's is in the room. So yes, we already have. Yes, we are planning to. No, or I don't know. So I think I can probably guess the results, but yes, surprise me. So we'll move now to the poll results, if that's okay. So where are you all in the room today? So yeah, interesting. So just under 30% of the people in the room today already have, and then the vast majority are kind of gearing up to do so. Literally nobody at all isn't planning to, which is good and perhaps unsurprising given the nature of today. And there's a few in the don't know camp. So welcome to you all, and that gives us a bit of a guide for where you are as we move into the presentations and yeah, the question and answer afterwards. Speaking of which, yeah, absolutely. Just point you in the direction of the Q&A box. This is your opportunity to ask the questions that are going to be most useful to you in your jobs and to guide your thinking and your organisation's thinking. So please, throughout the presentations, do make use of that Q&A box, and I'll pick up on as many as possible of your questions following those presentations. So yeah, just a reminder, have a look over there and make use of that Q&A box. Right, that is plenty from me. So we just tee things up a little bit, and now we'll move into the detail. So Guy, welcome, and it is over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Nick, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be with you today. So as Nick said, I'm Guy Woodruff, Policy Lead for the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund in BEIS. So what I'm going to do is just quickly run through a bit of the context for the Social Housing Decarb Fund, a little bit about the current demonstrator project, and briefly touch on some of the learnings that we're getting from that, an update on the first wave of the main fund, and then a little bit about what next. So I think, as people will kind of be familiar with and recognise, is that challenge of decarbonising the nation's homes that Nick talked about, and about the sort of big numbers that are attached to this, and the amount that kind of homes contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So we recognise that challenge, and collectively and collaboratively, that's what we need to be addressing. And there are a range of ways in which we are doing that. So although I'm talking about social housing decarbonisation fund, there are other funds are available. So this was titled "How to Fund Retrofits for Carbon Net Zero," and although I will focus on social housing element of that, other funds have been available and will continue to be available to people to support retrofit work. So as an example, we launched the Sustainable Warmth Competition in June, which brings together the local authority delivery scheme and the home upgrade scheme. So that's sort of been open, closed, and is currently going through the assessment phase for that, and is expecting to allocate funding to successful projects by the end of this year, and for those to kick off next year. We also have the energy company obligation, so ECO, and so that's been really successful in supporting energy efficiency and heating measures for low-income and fuel-poor households across Great Britain. So that's been really successful, and we just consulted on the next phase of that ECO 4. And we've increased the value of that fund as well. So we're just kind of going through those consultation responses and looking to bring in the successor eco scheme in 2022. But what I will focus on is the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. And say kind of a little bit of the context, a bit about the demonstrator, where we are now and where we go next. So this is some of the context. I think this will be familiar to a lot of people. The Decarbonisation Fund originated from both the National Infrastructure Commission work and recommendation about there being a major programme and spend for energy efficiency improvements in social housing, and reflected in the 2019 Conservative Manifesto, which committed to that 3.8 billion 10-year programme of funding for social housing retrofit. And that was part of a bigger 9.2 billion planned investment in the energy efficiency of not just homes, but also public buildings, so schools and hospitals as well. So again, funding to address the retrofit of buildings, so homes and public buildings as well. But what we're really focused on in the Decarbonisation Fund is addressing the around 39% of homes that are currently rated below EPC C. So that's our sort of target market, if you like, and so and partly that reflects the fact that we've got some of the most vulnerable in society within those social homes. So we made a start with an opportunity for an investment in the demonstrator project, which was launched in 2020 and is currently live. And so that has been an opportunity to do some really good learning, and I'll come back to a bit of that learning. And then more recently, we've launched the £160 million first wave proper of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. Again, I'll say a little bit more about that as we go through. But just to kind of reinforce the range of aims for the fund. Of course, it's about reducing emissions of housing. But we take a very sort of tenant-centric view of the social housing sector, and so there's a big focus on improving comfort, health, and well-being of tenants, and we are firmly supporting the delivery of fuel poverty and clean growth targets. So that's homes, as many fuel poor homes to EPCC by 2030. That's a fuel poverty target, and then we've got the clean growth strategy ambition. And at the same time, as well as providing those warmer, more sustainable and lower cost homes for tenants, it's very much part of the agenda of supporting the supply chain and green jobs and building the capability and capacity of that supply chain. So those are our complementary aims for the programme. As I said, we kicked off a demonstrator project. So this was a bit of an opportunity to explore deep whole house retrofit. So really looking at innovation in that space, looking at how we could drive that particular focus forward and really support the sector in learning how we might sort of scale up and deliver that at pace. So that demonstrator project funded or is funding 18 projects right across England and into Scotland, and is looking to upgrade over 2,000 homes and support jobs as well. And it's dealing with a very broad range of different types of housing. And again, this sort of reflects Nick's point that we've got a really diffuse sort of range of buildings that we are having to deal with right across the country. So we need to be looking at a wide range of different approaches and learning from that, so that we can apply that learning. I think from a couple of sort of key bits of learning from the demonstrator projects, and probably this is not going to surprise anybody, but one of the key things is you can never get going too quickly. So really important bit of learning is that that everybody should be planning for success. So from the moment people are developing and designing their applications and their bids to funds, be thinking about how they're going to deliver, be thinking about the supply chain and how that is engaged, be thinking about the partners that people may be collaborating with and how that is going to work. Be thinking very clearly about the stock and how they're going, and which stock to address and how they're going to do that. And I think this will be picked up through this conversation and through the presentations. Is really working hard on having really good information and data about our existing assets, the existing stock and its condition, and where we are trying to get it to. So planning early, designing early, and making sure that we've got everything in place so that when the sort of green light goes, we are all set to really get on with the work. I think the other key bit of learning is around tenants and tenant engagement. And again, I doubt that's a surprise to anybody. And I know that a lot of effort and time goes into tenant engagement right across the social housing sector. But its importance to the success of projects shouldn't be understated. I think particularly in the sort of challenging times that that we've had, where we're more likely to see some higher refusal rates, and it's really important to bring the tenants along with us. And again, a bit about kind of knowing and understanding the stock is that there may well be adaptations to properties that that tenants have undertaken that may not have been captured. So people are kind of finding things when they go into homes for the first time that they weren't expecting. So again, kind of really knowing and understanding the stock is important, but investing in that tenant engagement and support is really vital to project success. So it's a bit about the learnings from the demonstrator project itself, but we've built on that and built on our learnings and have launched Wave 1 of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. This launched in August and actually is just about to close. We've got till Friday to get your bids and applications in. So hopefully that's all in hand for everybody who is going to apply. And with this, we've taken learning from the demonstrator, but I think it's really important to stress this is quite different in lots of ways. This is not the same sort of level of deep whole house retrofit, try and get it all done in one go approach. This is taking a sort of longer term approach to delivering a retrofit, and is very much about aligning with the long-term asset management strategies and asset management plans of social housing landlords, so that we can align the funding that we'll make available through the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund with the funding that landlords are putting aside as part of their asset management strategies and plans, as well as the funds that are specifically sort of targeted at decarbonisation and achieving net zero. So Wave 1, which is really looking to sort of scale up in terms of volumes and really getting into the 1.6 million social homes below EPCC, where we're taking a fabric first approach, so really looking to deliver the energy efficiency improvements, drive down the demand for heating in the home first, which is a big contributor to reductions of fuel bills, and also through the way that we've set that competition up, incentivising looking at a worst first approach, so the homes that are perhaps harder to treat and harder to reach in the sort of E, F and G. So although kind of recognising that the majority of stock is sort of at the EPC D level, probably around 1.4 million of those 1.6 million homes, there are still the harder to treat, harder to reach homes that we do need to address. But as part of that longer term view that we're taking with the Decarbonisation Fund, also taking that lowest regrets approach to the future. So this is still a whole house approach. It may not be do it all in one go, but it is still part of determining what a home needs in order to retrofit and decarbonise, being really clear about how that is going to be taken forward and planned for, to make sure that we don't have to go back to homes and do any remedial work or changing things that we've already put in. So we want to make sure that what we do today is very much part of that pathway for tomorrow. So that's Wave 1, which closes for applications on Friday. We expect to be awarding late this year, so that projects can kick off early next year. And then just coming finally to a look forward, and just to kind of heavily caveat everything that I say next, this is all subject to the current spending review round. So this and on what comes out of that spending review. But we are planning Wave 2, the next phase of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund right now. So this is us doing the planning for success bit. So this is very much about continuing the journey that we are starting with Wave 1, and again looking to deliver those energy efficiency improvements to homes, looking to include clean heat measures where they are most needed, and where they contribute to reducing fuel bills. So again, very much looking for that longer term view, and looking again as a sort of change for the future, looking at delivery over a number of years, so that we can work with the sector, so that we can align our funding with sectors' plans and funding, and that we can all take a longer term view about how we address our stock. So that continues what we've started with Wave 1. As I say, it's all subject to considerations of the spending review. But if everything kind of works out, then I would anticipate that in spring next year, so spring 22, we'd be coming to the sector with another funding opportunity. Fingers crossed, even more significant as well in terms of funding that could be available to really scale up and to really get into the sort of volume and numbers. But one of the important things that we're doing, and it does come back to the point about really kind of understanding both the condition of current stock and the approaches we need to take to retrofitting. Something that we've set up in support of Wave 1, the Social Housing Retrofit Accelerator, which is there to support social housing landlords in making the most of the funding opportunity that's available. So that's in place, and we're looking to build on that, and that will be about capturing learning, sharing learning, and sharing successes and case studies, so that people can learn the best ways of going about what is a really significant challenge. So that's all from me this morning. Sorry, for this afternoon, until we get into the Q&A. As I say, that was a pretty quick whiz through. There's quite a lot there, I appreciate, but I think the key takeaways are that we are really hopeful that we'll have further funding for the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund for future years, that we'll be able to take a longer term approach, and that we'll continue to work with the sector to scale up, to learn, and to really accelerate this whole agenda. So thanks very much, Martin. Thanks very much, everybody.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Guy. Yeah, right from the heart of government, and real insight into where we are and where we're going. Thank you very much for that. Loads of questions coming in, but just a reminder to you at home, do use that Q&A box, and I will get through as many as possible. And if I could just nudge the presenters just to stick to their time slots, and we'll get through as many questions as possible, because there's loads coming in. Thank you very much, Guy. Great presentation. And Nick, welcome. It is over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Martin, and welcome everybody. Just a brief sort of taster presentation from me, really. So just a little bit about myself. My background's actually in sort of public sector and housing, so I know exactly where you guys are coming from, trying to interpret all this government policy and funding and trying to make sense of it and work out what to do and when. So I'm on your side, even though I work for a manufacturer. I've been there myself, so I think I'm well placed to try and help you when it comes to that point. Next slide. So Guy touched on some of the funding, but the key sort of point I wanted to make was that there is an awful lot of funding out there at the moment, which is brilliant. I've been in this sector for 20 years plus, and we've never really seen this level of funding. And and also aligned with really strong government policy. So for the first time, we've got a clear plan on where we're trying to get to, and more important, how we can actually do it. So yeah, some of these funds are pretty vast as well. I mean, Guy went through the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund there, and it was great to see there's wave 2 coming, which will be over a 5-year period, which is brilliant, because that's the kind of message I'm hearing from local authorities and housing providers. I just need to see a little bit of continuity of policy and funding rather than just this stop-start short timescale. So that 5-year plan is really good to see. We've still got lots of funding that's available now. So I get asked a lot by housing providers, should I sort of sit tight and wait to see what's coming, or should I act now? But yeah, definitely act now, because there's a lot of opportunities with the Local Authority Delivery Scheme, which runs until the end of March. We've started to see the first wave of the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme, which is part of the Sustainable Homes competition that Guy touched on. So that's another sort of £2.5 billion fund, obviously subject to the spending review. But yeah, there's lots of significant funds around, and more to come, particularly on heat pumps. We've got the Clean Heat Grant starting in April, which is going to be the replacement for RHI. So again, that's promises to be quite an attractive sum of money up front, particularly for heat pump measures. But I mean, all these funds are designed around energy efficiency, low carbon heating, heat pumps, that whole house fabric first approach. So yeah, so I do get all this. I understand all these different pots of money. My role within Deakin is to try and get on top of it all and understand it. So yeah, please come and talk to me if you want to break down on these different kind of pots of funding. Just next slide. Yeah, so I mean, why install heat pumps? Again, this is another question that I guess asked quite a lot, because there's quite a list of measures that you can install as part of these funding pots. And obviously I work for a manufacturer, so I'm going to say this, but it is true in terms of sort of bang for your buck. If you're trying to reduce carbon emissions or lower energy bills, then heat pumps are right at the very top in terms of maximum impact. And certainly BEIS are moving to support heat pumps on a much greater scale than has been in the past. So heat pumps are sort of top of the agenda as a try to decarbonise the housing stock and move away from gas boilers. So yeah, so really strong benefits of reducing carbon emissions, lowering fuel bills, particularly on off-gas homes. But we're starting to see a move towards benefits on gas homes when we're looking at potential removal of electricity levies and heat pump tariffs, which are coming. So there's going to be a much stronger argument for taking out a gas boiler to put a heat pump in and still being able to save money on the energy bills, which is really key. Obviously, reducing fuel poverty levels. I spent a time working for National Energy Action, the fuel poverty charity, so I understand the importance of trying to reduce fuel poverty and energy bills. It's obviously central to what you're trying to achieve. And heat pumps themselves have now been so easy to install. I mean, 5-10 years ago, they were seen as a bit of a sort of technical product, future product, quite difficult to install. But that's the exact reverse now. They're sort of very easy water connections. We've got a growing installer network. That's very regional as well. So we've worked hard to get local regional installers on board. And it's more accessible than ever as well. We've just launched something called Sustainable Home Centres, which is a new concept. But essentially, it's a part showroom, part training centre, and part stockholder facility. And it means that anybody across the country can go and visit a showroom to see what a heat pump looks like and have a play around with it, see how quiet it is and what sort of size and how it's controlled. So rather than having to go to a Deakin factory or warehouse, we're going to have these within sort of 10 or 20 miles of everybody in due course. There's about 25 centres already, so quite a few, but that's going to grow pretty quickly. So that's a good way just to improve access and remove some of the barriers to help with heat pump deployment, because we're going to have these local centres where people could come and visit. And it could be obviously housing clients, it could be the general public, it could be new installers coming through. So yeah, it's available to everybody really, but that'll be quite a useful resource for everyone. Yeah, I'll not get too technical in terms of what a heat pump is, but the simplest way to describe it is it's a fridge in reverse. So everybody's got a fridge in their house, which takes the heat from inside the fridge to keep the cheese and butter cool. If you put your hand on the back of a fridge, it's warm air comes out the back. And a heat pump just works the exact opposite to that. So it takes heat from the air outside. All the technology happens in that heat pump box on the outside of the building, and internally it's just very familiar pipework, radiators, hot water cylinder and controls. So internally for residents, there's not a lot different between what you see on a sort of gas boiler install to a heat pump install, except you've got that unit on the back So yeah, this is one of the sort of myths I'm trying to dispel with these kind of sessions, that heat pumps are very easy to install, and certainly internally they're not too different from normal heating systems. And this is what they look like. So we've got a new range that's come out. So we've moved away from, moving away from the old sort of battleship grey kind of colours to sort of what looks like much sleeker and better designed. And they are very, very easy to install, as I mentioned. All the heat pumps have what was called like refrigerant, which is a gas that goes between the heat pumps and the indoor units. But it's all water connections these days, so installers love them. And we've got lots of new installers coming onto the market for that reason, because they are so easy to install. In terms of the temperatures, again, all the heat pumps used to run at quite low temperatures, which used to mean you had to install larger radiators, but heat pumps these days are getting warmer, the flow rates are higher, so these new monoblocks run up to 60 degrees, and we've got what we call like high temperature units that run up to sort of 70 degrees. So yeah, boiler kind of temperatures. So yeah, what was a barrier in the past, having to put a heat pump in put large radiators everywhere, large pipework, isn't necessarily the case. And there is a heat pump to suit every kind of technology. And that's pretty much it for me. Just a bit of a snapshot. I will say there's quite a bit of additional information, the sort of further reading category, including how we can help. Sort of part of my role within Deakin is just to try and help organisations identify the right funding pots, which are really important. Develop proposals. We can certainly help write funding bids for you as well. If there's certain sections that you need help with, we can certainly assist with that. Identify properties and do a little bit of targeting and marketing work. We can help sort of identify which properties are best, where to start, whether it's low EPCs or existing heating systems. We can do that. And then we can bring in local installers as well, because I get asked a lot, particularly from local authorities, trying to keep work as local as possible, how we can do that and just secure our work locally. And we've got a growing list of local installers that can buy products through the sustainable home centres as well, so let's link back to that. So we can keep work local, keep costs low, and hopefully develop some successful heat pump schemes for you. But yeah, I'll be around in the chat as well afterwards, so yeah, feel free to ask lots of questions later on. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. And yeah, loads of questions coming in, quite a lot about the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. I'll do the abbreviation next time, and plenty more besides heat networks and heat pumps. But just a reminder, keep using that Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as possible very shortly. Thank you, Nick. Rose, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Martin. So I'm Rose Bean. I'm the Exec Director of Assets and Sustainability for ABRI. I wanted to pick up today really on where ABRI is in terms of its decarbonisation journey, but also, more importantly, just start with the broader context. We're about to head into COP26. We're weeks away from this incredibly significant event, and actually just reflecting on kind of the broader macro position. So I guess the first point, the UK's #1 role in terms of hosting COP26 is to negotiate those more ambitious global climate targets. So that's in the form of nationally determined contributions, and that's really about countries setting out their efforts to reduce emissions. And actually, the latest UN analysis of those NDCs suggests that we're actually on target for a 16% increase in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So we've got some major challenges in the run-up to the summit. From the UK's point of view, as it currently stands, only around 20% of our emission reduction targets has a policy that's in place and potentially on track to deliver. And I know we're all eagerly awaiting some of those key government strategies that are coming down the line in terms of the heat and building strategy and the net zero strategy, and really starting to understand how we're going to transition in a fair and just way so that this doesn't disproportionately impact poorer households and drive inequalities. I guess the other key point at this stage is around public perceptions. This is a really significant point in time. I think we all recognise we need to drive public awareness on what decarbonisation means, particularly what it means for homes, what it means for heat sources. But there are some concerns at this stage that actually public opinion could be swayed against climate action. You know, with everything we're seeing in terms of rising fuel costs, the cost of living, that's really going to impact public perceptions, particularly around the question of who's going to pay, what's the impact in terms of fuel costs in the longer term. And then the final point, really picking up, Martin, on your point previously, is around green investment. So the anticipation really in line with decarb pathways is that, you know, predominantly it will be funded by the private sector. So what we see in a lot of the analysis is that public funding increases are relatively modest in comparison. So just really kind of bearing in mind, you know, the social housing fund is really, really welcomed, but it is there to stimulate private investment. It is never going to fund the entirety of this challenge. So I guess with that in mind, and in terms of what ABRI's been doing, and I wanted to kind of pick up on the retrofit and our broader approach. So we've been working to establish our full carbon footprint. So I'm talking here about Scope 3 emissions. So looking at all of our emissions flowing through our supply chains, through goods and services, looking at the carbon impact of our housing stock, and working towards and starting to assess the embodied carbon of our new development sites. So building that broader picture of what our actual footprint looks like. And we're currently in the process of setting reduction targets that will be predominantly based on science-based targets that will basically ensure that ABRI has not only net zero housing stock by 2050, but a net zero business. We've also just launched a new carbon dashboard. So that's really about building transparency throughout the organisation. So colleagues can start to drill down and really understand what's the carbon impacts associated with their areas of the business. And that's all starting to build the foundation of looking to implement a new framework for embedding environmental considerations into core strategic decisions. So ABRI will be looking to move towards internal carbon pricing as part of that. Our first ESG report will be published this month. So I think we're all really acutely aware that, you know, ESG reporting is really, really in the eye line of investors at the moment. Equally, we are starting to look at the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure recommendations. So looking to see if we can adopt those recommendations ahead of any mandatory requirements. And this for us is all about being able to demonstrate that really robust grasp of the physical and transitional risks associated with climate change, because that is absolutely what investors need to see. So really key consideration. In terms of asset management, so we have developed a high-level roadmap for decarbonising our homes by 2050 and hitting Band C by 2028. And that's a really high-level phased approach. It's setting out our expectations in terms of the UK grid decarbonising, and it's giving us that cost per unit. We've also started to reassess and almost re-life our stock. So I think the issue with the decarb agenda is it does change your assumptions about the lifespan of your existing homes. And whilst it's really counterintuitive from an environmental perspective, we will be considering regeneration. So we're currently assuming circa 900 units will fall within some form of regen consideration over the next few years as we start to set out our regen roadmap. ABRI has a really, really strong focus on driving an environmentally aware culture and engaging more broadly with colleagues and customers on behavioural and lifestyle changes which reduce emissions. So as part of that, we launched last year our Carbon Academy with a view to rolling out carbon literacy training to all of our colleagues over a 2-year period. And that does interlink with the customer piece. This is about aligning colleagues and particularly frontline staff with the ability to go and communicate with our customers about the broader issues of climate change, why we need to do the things that we need to do to our homes. So it's really gearing our organisation up. We also teamed up with a company called My Balance, and we launched an app initially for our colleagues, which is basically a tool that they can assess their carbon footprint on. They get tips and recommendations on how to improve that. And we get the data out of the back end to say, actually, is this driving meaningful improvements? So again, in the longer term, we're going to roll that out to our customers as part of a package alongside retrofit pilots. we're very focused on just sticking with the customer engagement theme, consumer behaviours and public perceptions. So we've done a huge amount of work looking at global studies, UK-based studies. And what we got from that is actually the UK does tend to rank highest in quite a few global studies in terms of the percentage of the public that thinks that climate change is a global emergency. So actually the UK has a very strong understanding that this is a considerable issue. Where we get the major gap is this piece around people understanding what does it mean for my lifestyle, what does it mean for the home. And if you look at the stats on the screen, the technology in terms of heating that ranks lowest in terms of public awareness is actually heat pump technology. So given how we're looking to ramp up in terms of that, that's a really significant issue. So we're using the research that we've done today, all of the insights, to basically launch a UK-wide research study that's helping us to develop our approach to customer engagement. It's helping us with some of our comms campaigns, looking to raise awareness about what's going to be happening to our homes. So it's really, really key for us. I think we all talk a lot about, and we all recognise that, you know, the only way the sector's going to succeed on this is if we collaborate. There is no point in every single organisation trying to kind of, you know, crack the nut, find the solution on their own. So that's why we are a founding member of the Greener Futures Partnership. So we set up the partnership with 4 other really like-minded organisations, and it was really born out of a desire to tackle the challenges associated with sustainable housing, but also answer some of those tough questions that we've all got at the moment about transitioning to that net zero economy. You know, what are the solutions for homes? You know, how do we get the supply chains, you know, moving? How do we utilise this in terms of social value? And it was set up because between us, we had a really, really kind of good and wide-spanning reach. So we've got 300,000 homes and around 600,000 customers. So we felt really well equipped to deal with some of the challenges associated with different archetypes, different geographies, different levels of fuel poverty. So it was a really key driver for us. So just looking at some of the key priorities for the GFP, at the moment it is about establishing common standards and targets. So we're really working to look at the different solutions across those different archetypes. Equally, we're looking at the issues associated with SAP. So we know that BEIS has an action plan that's very much looking to tackle some of the challenges around SAP and EPC data. But equally, we're looking, you know, at the fact, are there other energy rating systems that will support the sector in terms of decarbonisation? So absolutely not looking to replace SAP, that's a key policy lever, but just starting to ask the question, what other tools could the sector use? Equally, we're looking at how we drive greater social value. We're looking at how we get efficiencies through procurement. And finally, really, really focused on that customer engagement piece. And I guess the most important thing, we are here to share all of our learning, our finding, our knowledge with the sector. So it's really set up to kind of bring insights into the sector.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Rose. Yeah, lots to pick up on there, and I think that focus on how we engage with the tenants and residents and what that looks like. A couple of questions about that, and really key as well. So thank you very much, and just a reminder, do get those questions coming in, and we'll have some time at the end to get through as many as possible. Thank you, Rose, and David. Welcome, and it's over to you. David, if you're speaking, you're on mute at the minute. I can't hear you.
Are we off mute? Yep.
Yep. You're live. Yep. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to talk about the retrofit and environmental challenges that we're all facing today. Everybody on this webinar. So before I start, I'll just give you a brief background of who we are. So my name is David Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Asset Management for Clwyd Island Housing Association, a North Wales-based social housing provider. Established about 1978, we manage roughly about 6,000 homes of varying tenures. So we've got leaseholders, general needs, supported living schemes, hostels, extra care facilities. Like most traditional landlords, these homes are different in both build types and style and location, and of course varying in age. we have a mixture of EPC ratings, rating from D all the way through to A. Our estimate cost for the retrofitting challenge will probably be about circa £100 million to decarbonisation. We know that there's a correlation between poverty and poor quality housing and ill health, which places pressure on already stressed NHS sector. Wellbeing and mental health issues is likely to increase as we recover from the COVID, which is compounded by the already underfunded care sectors. So as a social landlord and a housing provider, it's very important for us all to understand that we should not be placing people into poverty by our actions. We all need to make sure that the right decisions for our residents are undertaken, and we should not do anything that has the possibility of placing them at a disadvantage. Our tactic to the decarbonisation challenge is to adopt a resident-focused approach, using a pathway to zero principles, which is based upon a PAS 2035 survey. So this will detail a fabric-first approach to achieve carbon zero with a set of new digital tools specifically designed for our decarbonisation journey. So what does that really mean? Well, firstly, we need to understand how the home is being used and what the occupants are doing. And this is the largest and where their largest energy use is. We will gather the information using recognised partners such as Warm Wales, who will conduct a Healthy Homes and Healthy People survey for us to get the residents and get them to understand their circumstances. This will help us to understand data, which is really important for our decision making. We'll also be putting trialling information energy systems, which is an IES. These will be connected to the utility supplies and will provide us with much needed information on what non-regretful measures could be implemented to each home. Once the resident-centred data is achieved and we have it, we will then overlay alongside our PAS 2035 principles, taking into account the fabric first, is what decarb measures should we be doing for that type of building. So the attraction of this tactic is that we'll get a better understanding of how the home is being used and how it's performing. We can then apply the right green measures that are required for a specific style of building. And then we can finally overlay our capital and planned maintenance component programme, which we have in our financial modelling. This will then plot out the green measures that will be done at each stage. An example of a green measure timing would be to understand how the fabric of the building interacts with any new measures, such as the induction of external wall insulation. You should not fit this measure if the roof detail will not sufficiently allow it. So this will cause future problems if we get it wrong. There's many examples of poorly fitted installations across Britain, and I think everybody would probably agree. Another example, if one of our residents uses a lot of hot water, we may want to look at bringing our hot water and heating elements of our programme forward in replace of a kitchen. By adopting a pathway to zero principle, this will allow a committed capital expenditure profile, which already exists in incremental places, and then we can drop our green works in between when they are due. The benefit of doing this is that we will not hastily replace capital components before they are depreciated, which could create additional pressures on your finances by writing off any large depreciation costs early. This tactic will allow us to decarb at the right pace and install the right green measures at specific known time, which the survey has identified. Our residents will be informed on how their home is performing and when it will reach carbon zero. This will help us to understand the timing of the measures and when they will be done accurately to start to plan out our budget and cash flow forecasts, but most importantly, report on our ESG. We already have started future-proofing our electrical rewires, so we're starting to put charger points in, looking at rewiring the PVs, USB charging points, just to name a few. All this will be non-regretful works. So what does this idea come from and what's the concept? Well, the pathway to zero itself and the PAS 2035 technique, together with the digital tools, which I've spoken about, are part of a 12-month collaboration initiative between 26 Welsh RSLs led by CERO and supported primarily by the Welsh Government, who have provided us funding to understand what the decarbonisation journey would look like and what we need to deliver that. It's envisioned that each home will have a passport to zero and the digital tools which will be used, again, to decommission the fossil fuels currently by the grid. Remember, the home is only part of the problem, as the energy consumption which serves the home needs itself to be decarbonised. This project will create a set of digital tools, survey practices with a resident-focused approach that will hopefully be adopted by all RSLs in Wales. We can then collaborate together to deliver our decarbonisation journey. We have heard today from other speakers about the possible funding avenues open to social housing, and we all have innovative ways on how we could potentially fund these works. The project cost of decarb social housing ranges from an eye-watering 104 billion to 250, and this is well documented within Inside Housing articles. We, like many businesses on this webinar today, did not recognise the significant importance of the decarb works and did not, until recently, form part of any previous financial forecasts or business plans. Again, social landlords are stress testing their income and expenditure, which, to be fair, under the current climate, is already in the challenging circumstances for housing providers. Social housing rent must be affordable, so we can't intentionally generate new monies through increased rent to pay for decarb work, or unless the home has the potential to be affordable in use, with the additional monies previously used to pay for high utility bills by residents could be used to pay for debt. But this may be placing residents in poverty by taking the additional money. But bear in mind this process could take up to 20 years to get a home to a level where it could be affordable or decarbonised, following the pathway to zero principles. So we need to know about the decarb expenditure, not necessarily generate additional new income for our businesses. So the question that everybody wants to know is, will decarb place businesses in debt? Even though it could be a 0% interest, it still needs paying back. Do we want loans to pay for something that we already know will provide no physical money return? Unlike new builds, we borrow money, new build will generate income. Will green finances be available? Will businesses, larger businesses, offset some of their carbon credits? Will they provide us with those green finances to enable to do the carbon work? Each business will have its own different stages financially and will be better equipped to deal with the challenges ahead as they see fit. We at Clued Allen still undertaking financial modelling and looking at ways in which decarb, together with our CapEx expenditure, will be harmonised. It's not going to be easy. I believe our sector have the people who are skilled and have the innovative approach to problem solving. However, it will take more than just cash to tackle this climate change. There is a delivery problem also, a trade skill shortage that is looming, and we have to consider this. Remember, we'll all be drawing down on the same resources and products. The supply chain will need to gear up to deliver this challenge as well. So I've given you a very high level and a canter through what I believe to be a decarb challenge, and hopefully some thought-provoking questions there. So I'm happy to link with any colleagues later on and share good practices to help the decarb challenge. Thank you, and that's me.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of our speakers. Really thought-provoking stuff, and a lot of detail in there. So, and I, from the questions that are coming through, I think directly addressing some of the issues that people have. I'm going to move to the questions now, and just a reminder, keep them coming in, and I'll get through as many as possible. We've got about 10 minutes to do that. And I'm going to start off, Guy, I'm going to go straight back to you, and I'm going to group a few questions together into what I'll loosely call the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund series of questions. And there's kind of objectives and costs and different approaches there. So first question, will the objectives of Wave 1 funding be different from that of Wave 2? Somebody saying that glad to say Wave 2 is 5 years more long term. Due to the grant cap per property, can you advise if registered providers are able to put properties forward in more than one wave to enable the property to be upgraded with all suitable measures? So a couple of questions there. And can housing associations apply directly for the Wave 2 as well? So, Guy, back in the room and over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin. Hopefully I'm coming through. So just picking up on those. So in terms of Wave 2, I mean, we're going through sort of the whole kind of design and delivery phase at the moment, and said subject to internal governance around exactly what it will do. But I think what I would say is that it will be a continuation of Wave 1. So it may not be exactly the same, but I think we'll look to continue broadly on that journey. In terms of who can apply or not, I'm really clear that we need to have the fund directly accessible for housing associations. So that's the intent for Wave 2. So we've just got to agree all of that. And then in terms of kind of properties and how they're dealt with through waves, I see no reason why the same property can't be part of sort of a series of waves. As long as we're not paying for the same thing twice, I think that's perfectly reasonable to take that phased approach to upgrades and retrofits and to take advantage of the funding available.
Fabulous. That's really clear, and I think that was a direct answer to several questions there. So thank you very much. One more actually on wave one and probably wave two, and it's I guess a balance between competing aims and objectives, and how any guidance you can provide there. So the question was, do you feel that low complexity, high volume, the need to hit band C and tackling worst first are consistent aims? I'm not sure they are. So I guess it's aims that are good in their own right, but do they compete with each other, and how should people kind of plot their way through those objectives?
Yeah, so I guess what I'd say is what we want to make sure is that the one, we kind of don't leave anyone behind on this journey, and I think Rose made the point about that sort of fair and just and equitable transition. So we don't want to leave people behind. So we want to find a way to accommodate both the sort of harder to treat properties, as well as tackling what is the majority of the stock that is below EPCC. So it's a bit of a balancing act. I think in many ways it's really for the individual social housing landlords to determine kind of what is going to work best for them, and what is going to be in line with their own asset management strategies and plans. And we'll try and design the fund to be as flexible and as accommodating as possible.
Thank you very much. Really clear answer. I'm going to move on to now a loose badge, which are going to be the heat pump questions, of which there were several. So I will throw them out and probably come to Nick and Rose on that. So Nick, I'll just tee you up. Are there examples of heat pumps being installed in the homes that are part of listed or heritage buildings? That seems to be a difficult balance to strike, and a point of contention. The questioner says, and then what role will heat networks play in the large housing schemes versus air source heat pumps? Question about how do the high temp heat pumps compare to the lower temp heat pumps? So a few questions about that, and I guess, and there's one about how does the running cost of a heat pump compare to that of a gas boiler. So I guess, how are people meant to be prioritising here? And a series of questions. I guess, I mean, probably picking up on Rose's point about that being a gap in the knowledge base more widely. How do we kind of fill that one? So Nick, coming to you first for some thoughts, and then Rose, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, some great questions coming in there. I was just reading them all as they come in. Yeah, so on the listed heritage buildings one, that's a good point. I mean, we do install lots of heat pumps into sort of conservation areas, heritage areas, and there is a way around it. And we have lots of discussions with planners, and we can do training with planners if need be. I mean, the simple answer is we've got a product called like a split system. What this means in basic terms is that it doesn't have to be on the building. It can be at the bottom of a garden or back of a garage. It can just be up to 30 metres away. So that's generally the solution for buildings where you don't want a heat pump on the outside of it, and it's just separated out. So essentially you've got an indoor unit, which is like a boiler, and an outdoor unit, which is the heat pump, which is the bottom of the garden. So that's our sort of way around. There's other solutions as well that we tend to work with planners on to keep certain regulations happy. But yeah, there's certainly options to do that. Heat networks against heat pumps, yeah, another good question. I mean, they've both probably got a really good role to play. We're talking to some pretty large local authorities at the moment about sort of citywide solutions. So yeah, looking to use larger scale heat pumps and to sort of on a district heating scale alongside sort of smaller individual ones. So yeah, that's definitely coming, as is sort of the whole connectivity thing as well. So making heat pumps fully connected and linked to things like solar PV. So you're optimizing all that PV that's being generated. You're optimizing all the cheap electricity you can store in a battery, for example, and even electric car chargers as well. So it's all being connected. So all that's very much just around the corner in terms of what's happening in the future. COP, sort of, performance rates against high temp and low temp. I mean, there's not as much of a difference as you would think. You do lose a little bit of efficiency the higher temperature you go, but not as much as you would imagine. So yeah, you tend to find that sort of sweet spot in terms of what you actually require for the building against the sort of cost of the work. So yeah, if you can save putting new radiators throughout the building, you might sacrifice a little bit of efficiencies, but you're still going to be getting a highly efficient heat pump. So it's certainly worth looking at, depending on the building. Running costs was a really good question, that, because for a long time, trying to sort of sell heat pumps into the gas boiler market has been difficult purely because of the gap between gas and electricity prices, which has been at sort of 4 to 5 pence. But I know there's changes afoot with that. Obviously, I know BEIS are looking at the levies that are on electricity at the moment. We've got heat pump tariffs coming in, so this gap is closing quite rapidly. But generally, heat pumps are about 350% efficient, and the gas boiler is about 90%. So as soon as you close this gap between gas and electric to what it is now, then heat pumps become much more viable. And the next sort of 6 months, we'll start seeing lots of new boilers being replaced by heat pumps, and the residents saving money on the energy bills. So that's quite key. There was just one other really good question from Ian Morris on sort of space internally as well, about cupboard size. Yeah, and I should have mentioned in my presentation, because internally you do have to have a hot water cylinder, which can be a challenge in social housing properties. So I'm well aware of that. I had that myself when I used to work in housing. But there's quite a few solutions these days with slimline cylinders. We've got thermal stores, or even like a hybrid heating system as well. We can use a gas boiler alongside a heat pump, and the gas boiler would do the hot water, for example, meaning you don't need a hot water cylinder. So yeah, the point is there's a solution for everything, and every question that's been asked I've sort of worked with, and I've been there myself when I used to work in housing. So yeah, I'm happy to work with anybody on particular issues.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. And Rose, I'll bring you in, and I'll just run over by a couple of minutes, because I know that just to make sure we get through as many questions as we possibly can. Any thoughts on that, kind of filling that gap on heat pumps? But maybe let's also move to householder engagement, a question on that. How are we helping people to see what is involved and why? And I guess probably that balance between, is it just kind of informing people, or is there other models out there? I mean, you talked about your own, but other models out there which is perhaps a bit more collaborative. So what's catching your eye, perhaps apart from your own model as well? So Rose, over to you.
Yeah, and I was going to pick up the point as well, just quickly, about looking at where levies are going as well and fuel bills, because that's going to be really critical. I think in terms of engaging customers and the work we're doing with the GFP, it is about understanding a whole suite of measures that work. So, being able to present case studies to customers to engage them on where we've had successes. We're looking at kind of some of the implications around engaging people on the use of the home, which is really important. I think someone picked up that's a real challenge. And actually, talking to people more broadly about the challenges, there's no reason to take a paternalistic view of this with our customers. Absolutely engaging them on the broader topic will support the conversations about the changes to the home.
Thanks very much. Really clear answer. And David, I'm going to move to you next, if that's okay, and for a couple of brief answers on, I guess, where you get started, because there's a couple of questions come in that are interesting about the amount of information that's out there and how you start to prioritize things. And I think, some of the questions thematically are about prioritization in a way. I mean, there's a question here: is there a one-stop shop approach available to find and fathom information? It's very hard to see all the different initiatives and comprehend the landscape and the hoops to leap through. And then a specific question, which I think is kind of linked, which was direct to you, which was that: how did you start your journey in terms of knowing today's position and enable you to create your plan for net zero? So I guess it's, how do you kind of pull it all together and work your way through? I mean, you talked about, it wasn't in your financial forecast. That I think, gathering people are in very different positions here. How do you kind of start and make sense of it all?
Okay, it's a good question, and hopefully I'll give the right answers to. So basically, we're starting from point zero. So we know all about our stock, the condition of our stock. What we didn't know is about how the stock is being used by the resident. So we've got certain residents that might use the building differently. So do people work often? Have they got more kids? And what we wanted to do is understand the in-use, and that was the big part that we're going through now. So we've been quite fortunate here in Wales by having grants given to us by the Welsh Government. So we've just recently been given £500,000 to do what they call an energy redress, which is actually tackling and getting in behind the front door and speaking to residents. Are you on the right tariff? Are you using the electricity correctly? Is the house itself insulated? We've got data that we can overlay on that, but what we was missing was the in-use data about the homes. And then what we needed to do is make sure, like my colleagues have alluded to before, is that we haven't put in anything in our business model to do this decarbonisation. Like I said in my presentation, £100 million that we didn't forecast. So we need to make sure whatever we do is not regretful. So we've started now to look at non-regretful measures. So when we're doing kitchen replacements, we're starting to put USB sockets in. We're looking at car charging points. So yeah, just to answer the question, it's no reference point. This is all new. We're sort of playing it out as we're delivering it. The biggest thing for me is collaboration with other RSLs, because we're all trying to resolve the same problem. So for me, collaboration is the big thing. So I haven't got all the answers to everything, but I've got some ideas, and I'm more than happy to share offline.
Thanks very much, David, and thanks very much to all of our panelists. And collaboration, hopefully, is what today was all about. And yeah, I think that's a great point on which to draw things to a conclusion. So all that remains for me to say is thanks to all of our panelists, some great insight for getting through a huge number of questions in one bite there as well. So we covered a lot of ground today. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope that's been useful to you, and thank you all very much for sending in so many questions. I hope we got through a decent cross-section of those. So thank you too. And thanks to Dakin for sponsoring and making today possible. Very much appreciated. So yeah, thank you all. Really enjoyed today's debate, and see you all very soon. Thank you.